Hi, I'm Annabelle Sedano. Tonight we welcome several guests who will be joining us in the studio to share their unique reflections of growing up in Yanbu, Saudi Arabia. These people came from a variety of backgrounds and each had a different experience, yet they're all still connected by a sense of community with each other. Many even reestablishing this bond more than a decade later, as if no time had passed. What makes this place so special? We'll start our examination with a little background of the city they called home.
Saudi Arabia, a closed country filled with ancient traditions. To many, this country may seem like only a vast barren land. However, there was a unique contrast of Western influence merging with the nomadic existence of the past. A land in transition. Along the Red Sea to the west is located the city of Yanbu. Old Yanbu, referred to by the locals, is defined as the historical part of town having been in existence for thousands of years as a result of Egyptian traders who crossed the Red Sea to create land routes to other cities. Old Yanbu still thrives today as a fishing port and marketplace. Modern Yanbu, about 10 miles away, was created from the ground up starting in 1977 as part of a 30-year master plan by the Royal Commission under the direction of the king. Known as Yanbu al-Sanaya, it was a huge undertaking, literally evolving from sand to city. The greatest transformation being the construction of the new port facilities to handle the crude oil from the east-west pipelines. To complete this project, companies brought in their employed men and their families from all around the world to live there while the work was being done, forming a unique, multicultural society. Through the late 70s and 80s, Yanbu al-Sanaya developed into a modern residential and industrial city. Those fortunate to experience life in Yanbu observed the transformation from empty desert into a community of homes, parks, schools, hospitals, and recreational facilities, all connected by modern paved roads and landscaped pedestrian paths winding through open courtyards. A modern suburb, tucked in a desert between the mountains and the Red Sea, a place where, despite the rapid growth, the pace of life still slowed in remembrance of the past.
Our guests today will discuss their experience of growing up in Yanbu during the 80s before the Gulf War. We have with us today Chris Williams, Liz Hall, and Brandon Smith. Let's begin with you, Brandon. When your dad first moved to Yanbu, the town was in its beginning stages of construction. Many families were also coming into the country for the first time. Do you think this strengthened the bond within the newly developing community?
Yeah, because I think for all of us, this was all of our first experiences somewhere else, and I don't think any of us really knew what we were giving up when we were moving there. And when we all got there, it was just really small. It was just like a really small town, and you knew everyone else who lived next to you, and you knew everyone, all the families were just like one big family. And yeah, definitely it strengthened us.
Liz, you said once that life in Yanbu seemed almost like everyone was playing all the time. Tell us about that.
Well, I mean, we grew up, as Brandon was saying, I mean, it was a small community. We became each other's families. So, I mean, our Thanksgiving, there would be 50 people. We would spend weekends going camping. We would go water skiing on the Red Sea. And it was, you know, our parents had a different a sense of community with the people they worked with, and the time that they spent outside of work were with the people they worked with. So we all grew up together. So even though they're not my brothers, and I haven't seen, Brandon in about 10 years, we get back together, and that sense of community and sense of small town still comes back out.
Great. Now, Chris, you once commented that your family seemed to be on its own when you moved back to the United States. Why is that?
Well, when you spend so long overseas, although we grew up with these people, our friends, you're still socially, you're a little behind what's happened in the States. And once you get there, you have to relearn what everybody's done and things like that, relearn your family. Because as Liz said, these were our family, and now we actually had blood relatives, and it was just more of like integrating into the society again.
Brandon, having been in Yanbu since its onset, how did you respond to the new kids that were just moving in?
I think we used to give them a hard time quite a bit because, all three of us, we were there in the very beginning. And so I know myself and Liz, we kind of like had control of our grades. So if a new kid came in, yeah, we definitely gave him a hard time because that was our home. And so, yeah, we gave him a hard time.
Liz, you moved to Saudi at a young age. Did you ever remember having a greater appreciation for your country while you lived in Yanbu?
Yeah, I moved there when I was 4, and I remember people would ask me where I was from, and I would always say California. Even though I didn't remember California, I was from the U.S. still, and that was still such a part of me. And I mean, even though you're in Yanbu, I mean, the United States was still home because eventually you would have to move back to the U.S. So yeah, I mean, even though Yanbu was home for the 8 years, there was always the chance that you moved back. So I knew I'd be going back to the States eventually.
Brandon, you commented once that every family in Yanbu was always one baby step away from leaving.
Every year, we would talk about leaving, and it was just, I think all of our parents made decent money, and that was the reason we stayed. But like she said, that wasn't our home. I don't think we never felt. I always told people I was from California also, and it was just a tiny thing that would get us to move, and we just picked up and moved one day, and I think most families did. And
Liz, why was leaving Saudi harder than, let's say, moving from one state to another?
Because when I left Saudi, I knew, and I can remember clearly driving to the airport, I was 11, and I knew I would never go back to Saudi. There would be no opportunity for me to go on a family vacation there or visit the home that I grew up in. As being a woman, and especially being from the U.S., I couldn't just pick up and be like, I'm going to go to Saudi for vacation. So once you left, that was it. There was no going back, no visiting, the house that you played in or slept over in. So it's not like moving from Florida to California. You can go back to Florida, but you can never go back to Yanbu.
Chris, you said once that you knew growing up in Saudi wasn't normal, but it still seemed normal to you. How hard was it adjusting back to the United States?
Well, what was normal to me wasn't normal to what happened in the States, as I was saying before. Like, you come from Saudi, which was basically a very family-orientated place where everyone knew each other, hung out together, and you could go to anyone for help. And you come to the States where everyone's kind of a stranger, and you just got to deal with it. I mean, it's tough. You get picked on, but you kind of move on.
Do you ever tell people that you grew up in Saudi Arabia?
I used to, and then it would just get a little too complicated. People would start asking me questions, so I just kind of drop it.
Okay. Liz, do you think you would have become a different person had you stayed in the United States?
Yes. I wouldn't have had the opportunity to travel as we did. I don't think my parents would have had the opportunity to, as Brandon was saying, I mean, you get paid pretty well to be over there. It's one of the perks of going to work international. So it gave me a lot of opportunities to travel, meet the people that I met. I mean, it's 8 years of my life. Of course, if I didn't have those 8 years, I would have been a different person. I think you realize there are other cultures out there, and you're more open-minded to the other cultures and their beliefs and thoughts.
Thank you guys so much for sharing your experience. It was great having you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We just saw how this Yanbu connection still thrives, but nowhere was this bond more evident than at the Yanbu International School reunion in 2003. More than a dozen people gathered together to remember the past after being apart for several years.